Well, hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Unlock Show. I'm your host, Tracy Wilson, and it is 2023. I'm so excited to be here with you guys. And if you're anything like me, we kind of turn the page when the calendar turns the page from 2022 to 2023, and we start thinking about all the things that we want to achieve in this new year. But if you're also like me, have been in the past, where we've also turned that page and we've taken with us that little inner critic that doesn't serve us well, or we've taken with us imposter syndrome, they are there and they are going to, if we do not leave them behind and shut the door on them, they are going to start to derail us and derail all of the things that we want to do in 2023. So I'm excited to have my very special guest here with me today, Sheryl Anjanette, because she is going to talk to us about how we can leave that little inner critic and that imposter syndrome way back in 2022 to enable you to actually move forward with confidence, knowing exactly what you need to do so that you can take all of those dreams, all of those desires, all the goals and aspirations that you would have sat down and created for yourself probably a couple of weeks ago, and you can make them an absolute reality in 2023 without having to worry about the inner critic, without having to worry about that itty bitty shitty committee that we often take with us, or all of those horrible things that we have going around in our mind. So I want to say a huge big welcome to Sheryl.
Well, thank you so much for that, Tracy, and I'm excited to be here too. You're kind of in the future for me.
I am in the future for you. So, you being where you are and me being in Australia, I'm going to say I'm ahead of your time. So that being said, I want to sort of share with everybody a little bit about you and how you've come to be doing this, because this has been a bit of a journey, and I know you do this extremely well with a lot of the clients that you've been working with, coupled with your training, your expertise around hypnosis and NLP, and you've really got this system and this process that helps people to silence that inner critic and be able to move forward in their lives with confidence and vigor and enabling them to achieve all the things that they want. So how did you come to be doing what you're doing now?
It's so interesting. I mean, in some ways, I took a very unconventional path. I have more than 30 years in the business world. I was an entrepreneur 3 times. And one of those companies I had for close to 20 years. I've been, been the business world all the way up to the C-suite and worked for some really large, billion-dollar companies. And so through that, I had to grapple with my own self-journey, my own experience of imposter syndrome, the times that I would self-sabotage, the times that I would feel the fear and do it anyway, but I'd still come out the other side with that anxiety and that rumination and maladaptive comparison and all this stuff, right? All this stuff, the perfectionism, the people pleasing. And so I finally got to a point, and I was fortunate to be able to kind of just step back and say, what do I really want to do? Where's my passion today? And that was really in the healing arts. And so I did the deep dive into integrative nutrition as an integrative nutrition health coach, as the integrative hypnotherapist, meaning I've studied and I practice multiple modalities. I did a clinical certification in stress, anxiety, and self-regulation. I did an advanced certification in cognitive behavioral neuroscience, and all that to say that I wanted to have a nice wide tool belt. So I worked through this, and I worked with people in groups, and I wrote a book. And I just really thought there's got to be an answer here. So many people feel like they just have to live with this. They just have to cope and just kind of figure it out. And it's always going to come back to bite them. And I say, no, I say, we can get past this. I was just very, very stubborn and decided I'm going to figure this one out.
So you're now in a world where you're saying it doesn't have to be that way. Like there is another way, and there's this world in this life where you can free yourself from that inner critic, from that anxiety that we actually create for ourselves so that you can actually live with balance and peace and the things that you actually want in your life. What an amazing journey. And the fact that you've gone and you've not only just learned or immersed yourself into one modality, but learning and immersing yourself into multiple modalities so that you then can bring all of that together and say, now that I've got all of these tools in my belt, how do I use all of those to the best of my ability to help the people that are reaching out to me or who are saying, hey, I also want to free myself from these burdens that we've created, right? So I think that's amazing. So let's talk a little bit firstly, because sometimes people don't always understand what imposter syndrome is and why that matters. So kind of let's start there, and then we might even start to unpackage some of the other things that imposter syndrome manifests, into other things. So what is imposter syndrome at its core?
Yeah, it's such an important question because there's so many misunderstandings and so many myths around imposter syndrome. So very simply, it is a psychological pattern where somebody feels like they're not good enough despite the evidence to the contrary. So despite their accomplishments, you see, there's a bit of cognitive dissonance. And it's really important to understand that, this becomes patterned, right? Almost like habitual, if you will. A lot of people think that it's just behaviors and actions that become habits. And in fact, our thoughts, our self-talk, our beliefs also become habitual or patterned. So really, really important to understand what that is. It doesn't mean you're actually an imposter, and it doesn't mean other people think you're an imposter. You see, so it's a real thing. Sometimes people will say, oh, it's just self-doubt. But, it's so maladaptive. Self-doubt, fear, even comparison, perfectionism to a degree, in what I call the healthy zone. Those are human responses, right? We adapt. We feel a little bit of self-doubt. We kind of work through it and we move on. But with imposter syndrome, it becomes really maladaptive.
Yeah, so you're talking about this, we'll elaborate a little bit more even on this healthy zone. So when you talk about that, what exactly do you mean by the healthy zone?
Yeah, I'm so glad that you asked, because this is a term that I've coined, and I talk quite a bit about it in my book, and it's so pivotal to how you actually get past imposter syndrome, because so many people will say, oh, at first it's, oh, I'm alone in my experience. Nobody else feels the way I do. It's feeling like a fraud, feeling like I'm going to be found out as not as good as other people think I am, right? It's constant, and so we go from feeling very alone to this feeling of, oh, it's really common. Everybody has it. And the truth is, no, not everybody has it. We don't have it. We experience it. It's something like now, since the pandemic, 85% of people, which means a good 15% of the population do not experience this, which tells us that you don't have to. That says, if 15% don't you wish to be part of that 15%? So this is where I explore this. And I say, let's not normalize this. Let's not say, oh, everybody has it. I just have to live with it. I'm going to get some coping mechanisms. And that's what most people say. So when you talk about the healthy zone, what you're saying is, all right, when I get a little self-doubt, or I'm starting something new, or I feel a little bit of fear, is that actually imposter syndrome? Well, if you can bring it into that, think of it like a circle, think of a large circle, because we are dynamic beings, right? Things happen. We're sitting here, we're calm, and then we could get a phone call that tells us that somebody is ill, or another phone call that tells us that we just landed the, biggest client we've ever had. I mean, we have things that happen and we adjust, right? And we move with it. So think of kind of a large circle and the pendulum swinging, kind of rocking over that. And something happens and it goes a little far and you adjust and you get back into the healthy zone. You feel a little bit of doubt. You feel a little bit of fear. You feel some comparison. Oh, look at her. Look at what she's doing. I'm not quite there yet. So what happens is you find out what the healthy zone really feels like. We live, when we're experiencing imposter syndrome, in this maladaptive territory, and we've normalized it. So it starts to feel like that's our set point. That's our normal. And that really leads to burnout. It leads to anxiety. It can lead to depression. It can really lead to, poor sleep. It can hurt relationships. It hurts the business. When I work with people, they have these astounding results. Entrepreneurs that, within really just a few weeks are suddenly like landing big clients and, stepping out and doing things that we're just holding them back.
Yeah, I'm glad that you really have made that distinction for everybody, because the distinction of you don't have this. You don't have imposter syndrome, right? You experience it from time to time. And when we understand that, that is a huge distinction and a huge realization that you get to experience, because you now understand that you don't have it. And you don't, so if you don't have it, you experience it for a period of time, and then you allow yourself to let it go, and you understand that you're in that healthy zone of, sometimes we're you're not questioning, but you are assessing things. And when you allow yourself to do that, that's healthy. Now, and moving away from that, outside of that sort of circle or the pendulum swinging one particular way and ending up in that unhealthy zone. Now, I want to now go to, we've talked about imposter syndrome, but how does that then, what's the correlation with that and say unhealthy self-talk or the inner critic? Like, is there a connection there? And if so, how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, so if I can, let me explain kind of my methodology, and then it will make sense where all that fits in. So many people, when they talk about imposter syndrome, and especially trying to coach and help others get past it, they really focus on coping mechanisms. Feel the fear and do it anyway. Just move through your fear, and that's the cure for imposter syndrome. Or do these exercises. And I believe in all of those. I have more than 20 exercises in my book. It's really a book you use, you don't just read. But what those coping mechanisms do is they help you to change your patterns, pattern thought thinking, and pattern self-talk, and even pattern beliefs. But there's also an inside out approach. So I call that outside in. It's almost like peeling back the onion, right? I'm going to work on these little habits, and I'm going to catch myself, and I'm going to catch that voice in my head that's beating me up and say, okay, wait. And I have some really powerful exercises for the inner critic. But the inside out is really where we go and we say, where did this come from? What's the root? What is the root cause? Because, and I see this all the time when I do hypnotherapy, when you go back with somebody, there's usually a story. So what I always say, Tracy, is it's not so much our experiences. Our beliefs come from our experiences. And it's not even so much the experience, but it's the meaning we gave that experience.
Yes.
The interpretation we had at that age and at that stage. So you imagine that a 3-year-old sitting in a dark room and mommy and daddy are nowhere to be seen is going to have a very different response than a 13-year-old, or even than a 5 or a 7-year-old, right? Right. So you start to look at that, or like a client of mine whose mommy took her to learn to swim at 5 years old, and she left her with the teacher. She didn't know this teacher, it was a stranger, and the stranger threw her in the cold water, and mommy left, and she felt abandoned and scared. And, that affected her whole life in terms of having the courage to step out, or mommy and daddy are fighting. And, one of my clients, who's actually a celebrity, is hiding behind the curtains watching her parents fight, and all she wants to do is go out and play.
Mm.
And she thinks it's all her fault. Everything is her fault. So she lives her life trying to make everything right and afraid to go out and play. Really just
Mm.
play. So you see how these things, they sit in our subconscious mind. They create our beliefs. And I'm not talking about religious beliefs. These are the beliefs about our place in the world. Am I good enough or not? Am I worthy or not? Does my voice matter? Do I matter or not? Right? And what happens is our minds are kind of wired to, take care of any perceived or real threat. So we go into that threat. So we're a little bit kind of biased towards the negative. And we tend to use the mental filters because our brain also, or our mind also wants to make us right. So now a few things have happened that says, oh, I'm not good enough. Something might happen and I am good enough. But my mind goes, well, maybe I'm not. Maybe I really am not. And it layers and it layers and it layers. So it's almost like we have to go back and do that, but we can change that story at inception. We can change that interpretation in the subconscious, let go of that baggage. And people literally, like after 1 or 2 sessions, they just come out feeling lighter. It's very
Yeah,
rapid.
well, it's like poof, right? It's almost dissolved that that belief that you've embedded. And what I like about this too, of what you've said, is that it's not the experience that you had, but it's actually the meaning that you gave to it. And when we tend to give something a meaning, we give it power. We often make it bigger than it actually was, saying a mountain out of a molehill. And that then gets, I want to say, imprinted or embedded into that subconscious mind. And now without necessarily even knowing or realizing that we've done that at a young age, that is now imprinted on us. And what you're talking about is actually going back to that and saying, hey, is that right? Is that what you want that to mean? Is that still got the same meaning today that it had even 30 or 40 years ago? And when you disarm that, you say, hey, that's actually not right. Mummy left me at the pool because I was learning to swim. The teacher put me in the cold water because that's how children learn. That was the process. That's how they learn to do that. So it wasn't that mum abandoned me, that I felt alone in that moment. It's that was the process. I understand that now, and I've now instantly disarmed that, and no longer do I have that imprinted in my subconscious mind. Have I got what you're saying? Have I interpreted what you're saying correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting because even with adverse childhood experiences, even where there is trauma and real drama, and it's real, these things really happened, we can shift. It was not that the experience didn't happen. We don't suddenly say, okay, that just didn't happen, but we can change the weight of it. We can shift the meaning we put into it. There are just so many ways without actually re-traumatizing or going back into it that we can lighten it up, let it go, change we can even change it. So we say, okay, I would not have chosen that. But I do see now, the strength it gave me and this other lens that I'm able to look at other things through. So each session when I work in hypnotherapy is so different because you're working with a person and we are all different. So it's not like, okay, this is it. While my methodology really works and the approach works, we go back and we look at beliefs. We do self-talk swaps, but we learn how the subconscious mind sets that. We learn about those voices in the mind. Who are they? It's not just the inner critic.
Yeah.
There's the inner critic, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's also, a coach, and there's a best friend, and there are other voices in our head. And so it's how do you take that inner critic now? And how do we deal with it? And I have a few different ways because different things work for different people. And different things work at different times. But the idea is that we don't want the inner critic front stage. If you think about it, you're the, what is it? The writer, the director, the star of your own life. You get to choose who you bring in, right? You get to choose, not always, it seems like we don't choose, but to some degree we are, because we're saying, how much emphasis do we get? Where do they get to stand? Do they get to be front and center stage? And it's the same with the inner critic. So we do a lot where we get, it's, you know what it is? You bring the unconscious conscious. It's all just self-sabotage is below the surface, right? It's sabotaging. It's like the cloak. And I'm gonna, hurt you. Well, we don't want to hurt ourselves. We don't want to actually do that to ourselves. That's not conscious. So we bring it conscious. We look at it. We understand it. That's the awareness. We gain insight. So it's like 4 stages, Tracy. It's awareness, insight, alignment, and then integration. And we go through all 4 of those stages. And that's actually how the book's laid out as well. Awareness, insight, alignment, and integration. So we get the awareness, make the unconscious conscious, get the insight. You and I may both say we experience, and by the way, I always say experience. I never say suffer or struggle, because our subconscious mind is always listening. And doesn't it seem easier to change an experience than something you're suffering with or struggling with? So you and I may both have perfectionist tendencies. We may both really relate to this idea of people pleasing. Oh, yes, I was terrible. I never set boundaries. But where that came from, how it shows up can be very different. So it's a matter of giving people the skills and then getting that insight so you can see how this is really showing up in your world, right? For you. And then we get into the alignment. Okay, now I've got the awareness and the insight. Now I can get aligned. Otherwise, what are you aligning? It's not real. Those 2 pieces.
And if I think about this from the perspective of you talking earlier about, how you came to be doing what you're doing, you're using those same techniques and a very similar framework to actually help people. You've said, okay, I'm going to learn this, 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 and this, and I'm going to use each of those tools in combination to actually help someone. And now what you're saying is that you've got those tools in your toolbox, the 7 archetypes framework, all the tools that you have, and you're then saying, okay, well, the person that I'm working with, I absolutely understand that there are, we're all different. Every person is different. So which of these tools is the most appropriate thing to help that person at that time with that particular experience? And I love that, because you have that ability to be able to do those things. I want to know about, you've written this amazing book that is helping people all over the world to really understand what's going on with them, how to silence the critic, that inner critic, how to overcome self-sabotage, how to overcome the imposter syndrome. And within it, you haven't just made it a book, like you're saying, just a book that you would read, go grab a book, read it in a day, and that's the end of that. This is an experiential book. You're using it on the daily to help you to overcome whatever bubbles up, whatever's sitting in that unconscious that's bubbling up to the surface that has now become aware. You're giving them the tools in that book to understand and have that insight, be able to make the alignment and be able to integrate this framework and this set of tools that you're providing to people into their life, which I think is amazing. So I do want to let everybody know where they can get your book, because I think now is an appropriate time to do that. So if we wanted to get a copy of the book, where do we go?
Well, worldwide, I think Amazon is still the best place because it's really in all of the markets. And there is a hardback, a paperback, and the Kindle version. I personally, I love hardbacks, but this one, I really love the paperback. And I think it's because you can almost use it like a workbook and a manual, and you can highlight it and dog ear it. And like I said, there are 20 exercises, and if you do the exercises, they work. They really do. So I will be doing a second edition coming out in May because I do a lot of work these days with burnout. And so I'm going to add a section really about, I talk about burnout here, but I'm going to go a little bit deeper. And so for anybody that reads the book now, if they go ahead and they give me their, what do you call that on Amazon? The
a review or
a review. A review, yes. They will be entered to win to be in the book. So if they would like to be, in my front part of the book with some of their reviews, then I will be choosing.
Well, there you go, guys.
Edition.
You can head on over to Amazon. The name of the book is The Imposter Lies Within. Silence your inner critic, tame your fear, and unleash, in my Australian and New Zealand accent, I'll say badassery. And I know Sheryl would say badassery. So there you go. So you can move into 2023 being a real badass. So you can make sure that you're able to silence that inner critic. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, like if you're someone who, we want these things, we try with all our might to create a new life, to have these goals and these aspirations, and we work our little butts off to try and get there. But if you're silently sabotaging in the background, or you've got that inner voice telling you can't do it, that's the thing that will constantly derail you and slow your progress down. So if you can, get hold of this and learn some of these techniques and have some of these tools in your tool belt to help you to overcome these when the things bubble up, I think, your 2023 is going to look extremely bright, as will your future moving forward. Now, I know Sheryl has got she talks about the 7 archetypes, and it's a framework. It's a very specific framework that she's put together. It's proprietary to what she does. And I thought it would be great if she talked a little bit about those. She might not share all of them, but let's just give everybody a little bit of insight into them, because then you need to go and use the book, experience the book for yourself, and you'll learn a lot more about them. So how about we just grab a couple of those, Sheryl, and let's talk through a couple of those archetypes.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that I've always done is I always like to have a framework for everything I do. And I find it's really, really useful. And, I had a marketing agency, so I've used these archetypes across my work. And so with this, I thought, there are certain behaviors that we're seeing. Here's what happens. People will say, well, yes, I feel like this, but I don't know where to put it. Where's the bucket? How do I really understand? And so by having these archetypes, it kind of creates these aha moments. So there's the perfectionist, and there are 3 types of perfectionists. There is the people pleaser, which we talked about. The people pleaser really has trouble setting boundaries, right? They tend to put themselves last in their own life. And all that comes from this feeling of, well, will I be accepted? Will I be rejected if I don't say yes? Will I be good enough? Right? There's the master. So the master feels like they need one more degree or one more certification to be good enough. The superhero, you've heard of the superhero. I mean, I was a classic superhero. And I think most people understand that archetype, right? We feel like we're the person for the job. We're going to do it all. And there's the savior that, I don't know about you, but it's like I felt like I always had to save the day. By the way, I've experienced all 7 of these. I felt like I had to always save the day. And sometimes what you find with the savior is they'll create scenarios where they need to come in and save the day.
Yeah.
Right? Or a person or a project. And they don't realize they're doing it. It's subconscious, really. There's the prodigy, which was really inspired by Dr. Valerie Young. She wrote a book, Secret Thoughts of Highly Successful Women. And she talks about this natural genius. And this prodigy is just one that I really experienced a lot. The prodigy feels like they need to go from 0 to hero or beginner to mastery immediately, because that in-between phase where you're learning and you might slip, feel like you're going to be exposed, right? It's not good enough. So we tend to quit, or we tend to not jump into things when we're experiencing that. So I think I got most of them. Did I do that? Perfectionist, people pleaser, the master, the superhero, the savior, the prodigy. Oh, and there's the Lone Ranger. The Lone Ranger.
Do it all on my own, right?
I'll do it on my own. And a lot of that just comes from, if I ask for help, someone may see me as not good enough. Now, we see this in work a lot. For those that work in the corporate world, I know most of your listeners are entrepreneurs, right? We tend to do that a lot as entrepreneurs as well. But it's just this fear that someone might see us as, not good enough. So you can kind of see at the core, there's a lot of this not good enough, not worthy, not deserving.
I mean, when you break things down like that, and people can start to understand those archetypes, and they start to see themselves in them. And like you were saying, there may be times where we've actually experienced all of those. At some point in our lives, we may have been the perfectionist, the people pleaser. And as we learn and as we continue to grow and we use these tools and these resources, we can start to identify, we start to be very aware of when we are almost falling in deeply into one particular archetype, and what we need to do to maintain balance and awareness and that alignment on an ongoing basis. Now, for those of you that are wondering, sitting back and thinking, gosh, I wonder which one of those I am. Or maybe you're thinking, yeah, I've been all of those, but I want to know more about them. And what does that feel like? What does that actually mean? I'm going to give you Sheryl's website that you can go to. And she's got a couple of quizzes on that website. So you'll be able to go there, do the quiz, and through her very sophisticated system, that's going to help you to understand which one of those is more, I'm going to say, more prominent for you. And then if you want some help in trying to understand that and how you can maybe overcome or gain some level of balance and alignment with that, then you'll be able to make some contact with Sheryl, because she also does some one-on-one sessions for those people that need it. So head on over to www.sherylanjanette.com. I'll put her website in today's show notes so that you can easily go and find Sheryl, and you can continue to have this conversation with her there. And you can also find her on Clubhouse. She's there on the regular too. Now, there's so much we could kind of keep unpeeling and pulling the layers back on this onion, couldn't we, Sheryl? We could talk for hours on this particular topic. But what I want to say to our listeners is, if that is you, if you are somebody who is feeling like that inner critic, you just can't silence it, you can't get a grasp on it, or you're feeling like you've got some level of imposter syndrome, or you're self-sabotaging, today's episode was for you. And it is for you so that you can move forward in 2023 without all of that baggage. And Sheryl is the woman to help you. So we're going to wrap up today's show because it's been very insightful. I know she's given you loads of tools already to understand this, but I want to allow Sheryl just to leave us with some parting words and anything else that she would like you to know before you click off today's show and you go about your business. And I've already told you where you can go to get some more help. So I'll open it up to you again, Sheryl, just for a moment, and you can wrap up today's show and share anything else that you would like to share that you think is important for our listeners to hear today.
Sure. Well, really, as far as connecting with me, I just work with individuals, with groups. We have our voyage past self-sabotage, and I'll tell you, we have had such amazing results. And I do work one-on-one around the world. We actually can do hypnotherapy right through Zoom, and it works beautifully. In some ways, I think it works even better than in person. Interesting, right? But the message I'd like to leave everyone with is this: you are extraordinary. You really are. You are good enough. You are more than good enough. You are worthy. You're deserving. Your voice matters. In fact, we need your voice. And you matter. So if you are carrying any of this around, if it is causing any kind of anxiety, if it's hurting your sleep, if you find yourself, always comparing yourself to someone else and finding yourself at the short end of the stick, or whatever that is, you can get past this. You don't need to carry it around. So thank you so much, Tracy. It's really just been a blessing being in the future with you.
You are most welcome. It's been an absolute pleasure having you in the future with me. And you guys, you've listened to me for, I think this is like 206 show. So if you've been around a long time, you'll know that what Sheryl is saying is echoing what I say to you. As the world needs you, they need your people are out there wanting your voice. They want to hear what you've got to say, and you can make a real difference in this world. So I'm going to leave today, like I always do. Go and live your life unlocked, because there is just no other way. You know that now. Make 2023 your year, and join me again for another episode of The Unlocked Show. We go live twice a week, 10 a.m. Brisbane time, Mondays and Fridays. So until I see you next time, live your life unlocked, and I'll see you again soon.